Robespierre, there stood the Legislative Assembly. This organization of well-educated liberals were wayward in their attempts to bring a new era of democracy not only to France, but for the rest of Europe as well. The Declaration of Pillnitz, proliferated by Prussia and Austria to restore King Louis XVI, was a direct threat to the Assembly and had to be dealt with the only sensible way possible: war. In response to despotic aggression, the legislative staunchly declared, "We will incite a war of the people against kings. 10 million Frenchmen, kindled by the fire of liberty, armed with the sword, with reason, and with eloquence, would be able to change the face of the world and make the tyrants tremble on their thrones." This bold statement against the monarchs of Europe would eventually set France on a devastating warpath until 1815. In 1792, France declared war on the Habsburg monarch, Francis II. Prussia, honoring its alliance of Austria, joined in on the side of the Habsburgs. The First Coalition, it was called, the first of many wars declared against expansionist France that would involve mainland Europe as well as Britain and eventually Russia. The beginning of the war went in favor of the coalition. While invading Austrian Netherlands, the French troops were too ill-disciplined and disorganized. At the first battle, the French army broke and retreated, murdering their own general in the process. Instead of inflicting the final crucial killing blow, the Prussians and Austrians instead bickered with one another on the partitioning of Poland. Back in France, however, a shadow of paranoia enveloped politics. Routed forces were reorganizing at the capital for a counterattack. An angry mob storms the king's residence in Toulouse. Louis and his family sought sanctuary at the nearby Legislative Assembly. Seizing this chance to utterly rid themselves of the monarchy, the Assembly suspended all powers of the king, imprisoned him, and called forth a new national convention. A period of intense radicalization occurred. This era of extremism and violence in France was dubbed the Second Revolution. After Louis XVI's imprisonment, the September Massacre started. This horribly violent event was triggered by rumors of active counter-revolutionary prisoners plotting against the revolution. In response to this, the great masses stormed the prisons of Paris and murdered half the people they found. Maximilien Robespierre, intellectual and radical, said, "To good citizens, revolutionary government owes the full protection of the state. To the enemies of the people, it owes only death." In the realm of politics, the new National Convention was headed by the majority Jacobin party. However, the Jacobins were growing ever more restless with one another. Thus, two main bodies, the Girondists and the Mountain, led by Robespierre, were formed. The immediate question for the National Convention was what to do about Louis XVI. The Jacobins could all agree that, as long as Louis remained alive, him and his descendants could pose a threat in the future. The Mountain advocated for his death, but the Girondists saw that the guilt of treason was enough. So, on January 21, 1793, Louis XVI, guilty of treason, was sentenced to death. Even though the war was well, turmoil in the French government remained rampant. The struggle between the Girondists and the Mountain eventually led to the latter party acquiring support from the sans-culottes, who made up the radical poor, ready to fight for change. The Mountain had armed the sans-culottes, and on July 2nd, 1793, arrested 29 Girondists for treason. The Mountain and Robespierre now had total power. The provincial governments of Caen, Bordeaux, Lyon, and Marseille rose up in armed revolt against the centralized state. The new revolutionary army had won a string of victories against the French government. which also had to pull troops from the front line against the coalition. In July 1793, Robespierre's France was in a dire situation indeed. Robespierre also introduced the first planned economy, telling the bakers what to bake, the craftsmen what to craft, and fixing the prices of certain produces. This greatly pleased the sans-culotte supporters, who more than anything wanted a just price for bread that was affordable to their income. The Total War implementation, as well as the economic reformation, allowed the vast French forces to continue the fight against Europe. A revolutionary propaganda campaign was initiated by the French government to instill the ideals of revolutionary patriotism on all aspects of French life. This new form of media indoctrination allowed the French to harness a never-before-seen weapon on the battlefield: nationalism. The huge influx of fanatic recruits to gladly die for their country and democracy allowed the armies of France to obtain a significant advantage against the less willing coalition forces.